Your sourdough starter is a pretty amazing leavening agent. We can use it to make sourdough ovals, rounds, sandwich bread, pizza, even chocolate chip bread. We can also use it to make croissants. Should I say it French? Croissant? Nah, I'm just gonna roll American style. We're making croissants. So however you want to pronounce it, a croissant is a laminated dough. So laminated means there's layers of butter sandwiched in between the layers of dough. Now, if you're familiar with making sourdough bread, a lot of this process is going to be real familiar, and then some of it's going to be very different. So we're going to start with, first let's talk about the leavening agents here. So we've got our sourdough starter, which is a biological leavening agent. It's the yeasts and the microbes that are going to help the dough to expand. But now all that butter that is layered in the dough is a mechanical leavening agent that is going to produce steam. And the steam is what's going to help the layers of the dough expand and have all those amazing air pockets that we get in our croissant. All right, let's get going here. The recipe is in the description, and I'll put the method in there also, just so you have the whole complete package in there. I'm just collecting some strawberries. If you don't collect them, the birds eat them. Okay, so recipe in the description. We're going to start with mixing by hand. Now, this could be a project that you do in a KitchenAid mixer, and I would probably have a different order of ingredients. So before all of the sourdough baking police get on my case, we don't need to do an autolyse. We're going to be just fine. The flour will get hydrated. The fat will be incorporated. We're going to have an amazing, elastic, supple croissant dough. It's an enriched dough, meaning that there's fat in it, and milk and butter in the actual dough itself. Okay, so kind of a similar start to the do-it-all dough. We're going to go water into the bowl. We're going to add our active starter, feed it, get it doubled up, tripled up, ready to party. It wants to leaven bread. And we're going to mix the starter and the water together. Mix it into like a smooth, creamy, homogeneous mixture. And from here, things get different. You can put your flour in the bowl, and then in a small saucepan or pot, we're going to melt our butter. And truly just melt it. We don't want to sizzle it. We don't want to break it. We don't want to brown it. And you can see here, the butter's melting. I kill the heat, melted the rest of the way, use a spatula, stir it up. Now there's milk in this recipe. I'm using whole milk. I think it is the right milk to use. If you use non-fat milk, I think you're asking for trouble. Use whole milk. We want the fat that's in there. Now I'm adding my milk to the pot just to take the chill off of it. The fire's off. It's just the residual heat from the pot is going to warm the milk, so I'm not adding cold milk to my dough. And then I'm going to add my sugar into the milk and stir that in. Yes, there's sugar in this recipe. I'm not going to bring it back up to heat. I'm not going to try and boil it. I'm not going to try and make it into a simple syrup. I just want to break down the sugar and get it to start incorporating into the milk, which is going to make it easier to incorporate into our dough. So if it's a little gritty and granular, it's just fine. We're just looking to kind of soften it up and hydrate it a little bit. It will, sugar is water. It's a liquid, and some of it in its other form. So I'm going to add it with the liquids now. So I'm putting it into a liquid to help kind of dissolve it and make it more easy to incorporate. Okay, so we've got our bowl, water, starter, flour. I'm going to also go salt now. And I know people are going to freak out. No, you can't put your salt in yet. You got to do an autolyse. No, we don't. We are going to be just fine without doing some kind of autolyse. Like I said earlier, if I were using a KitchenAid mixer or a standing mixer, I might have a different order of adding things. But we're going by hand, so anybody can do this. So salt in there. We're going to add our milk, butter, and sugar, and we're going to mix it. You have two choices. You could mix by hand. Works great. Love it. No big deal. Or you can start with, say, like a dough whisk if you want to avoid some of the stickier phase of the mix, and then go by hand. It's going to feel different because of the fat that's in there. But same technique as if you were making any sourdough by hand, mixing dough by hand. We're going to work our way around the bowl to kind of tap everything together. Use your index finger to scrape the side of the bowl and just work your way around. It's going to feel you're gonna have that kind of greasy feel from the butter. It's gonna get in there, it's gonna incorporate. Now, because we are mixing by hand, it might feel greasy and like it's not coming together, but just keep going. We're gonna have a rough, shaggy dough, just like we normally would if we were mixing a sourdough by hand. On the first stretch and fold, it's really gonna smooth out and become satiny. It'll have a shine from the fat, from the butter, but you'll see when we get there. So we're gonna mix it together, we get it all incorporated, you know, shaggy dough ball, scrape down the sides of the bowl. Now this is just a 400 gram batch of dough. So 400 grams just being the flour weight. That's how we talk about dough recipes. We talk about the flour because everything else is a percentage of the flour. And you'll see when you look at the recipe in the description, because everything is a percentage of the flour, it's easy to scale up. You just apply the percentages to 500 grams and you're making more dough, easy. Because this is a 400 gram batch of dough, I'm gonna store it in this Tupperware container. I believe this is a 64 ounce Tupperware container, just to put it somewhere where it's not in a giant bowl. I want it to have some sides to expand against, and you know, this container is also going to insulate it from the cold and the heat of the external environment that it's in. Okay, so stretch and fold. If you have made sourdough bread before, and I hope you have, because this is kind of an advanced thing to jump into if you've never made sourdough, this would be could be an intimidating project. Anyway, you're gonna stretch and fold. We're gonna do 4 of them as we normally would if you were making, you know, a couple of ovals or a couple sandwich loaves or pizza dough or whatever. And you can see here on the first stretch and fold, this is a super quick process. Look, I'm already done and I'm not even talking, right? We're just looking to put some tension in the dough, develop some of that gluten, build some strength into it. We'll cover it, we'll return in, I usually go a little longer. Normally, you know, you could say 30 minutes, but 30 to 45 minutes is a good time frame for your stretch and folds, just because of the fat, just to give the flour just a little more time to do its thing, to absorb some of the liquid, for the gluten to relax. You have a big one over here. Come here, you guys. I don't want strawberries. And then the second one, same thing. Take it out of the container. You can see it's getting elastic. And, you know, stretching and folding, not much of an effort here. I do it always in the air. I like to be able to handle my dough, feel how it's, you know, yielding to gravity. You know, it's also, as a baker, it's good to have the confidence in handling your dough and, you know, not feeling like you need a work surface. So this is a good technique for stretching and folding. And then the third one, we do it again, 30 to 45 minutes later. If your environment's on the colder side, maybe it'd be more like a 45-minute window of between stretches. And then fourth one, last one. And then we're gonna put it into the container and we're gonna allow it to go through a phase of bulk fermentation, which is really just a process of letting it double in volume. So while it's going through this phase of bulk fermentation, this is a great time to roll out your butter. Now, I've chosen to use a 400 gram batch of dough, remember, flour weight, 400 grams, because a Kerrygold block of butter is 227 grams. The amount of butter for a 400 gram batch is 200 grams. So all I gotta do is shave off a little corner on each side to bring my block of butter down to 200 grams, cut it in half, and now I have way fewer seams. So if you're trying to make this butter block, and we're gonna roll it out, if you have a lot of seams, I feel like sometimes it blows apart as it's more likely to kind of separate and then have an interesting, different kind of behavior inside the layers of dough when you go to bake it, or even as you're going through all these letter folds and rolling out, you'll see what I mean. So this method of taking the butter, cutting it in half, makes it so there's just one seam. Now we're gonna put it between some parchment paper, we're gonna roll it with a rolling pin. And here's one of those times where I'm so happy to have granite countertops that are ice cold. It's gonna make it so my butter doesn't get soft super fast. So I really like this metal rolling pin for this job. You could use a wood one. I just tend to like this because it's nice and long and it's gonna allow me to really work the whole size of everything that we're doing here. Now, this is not rocket science. We're really just trying to roll our rectangle of butter into about an 8 inch by 8 inch shape, kind of a squarish shape. And, roll it out, flip it over, roll it both directions, long ways, short ways. We're trying to keep that rectangular shape because it's going to go inside of our dough. It's going to get folded up inside of our dough in rectangular shapes. Now, we're trying to get this down to, I don't know, about 3/8 of an inch or so, 1/4 inch, somewhere in that neighborhood. Now, while you're shaping it like this, while you're rolling it, if it gets kind of round, you can see I'm just going to come around and I'm going to take off some of the edges to square it up. And I can take that butter and just kind of put it into the middle, and then we can come around and give it like a light roll just to flatten it back out and incorporate that back into our mass, our rectangle of butter. Sheet tray, refrigerator, we want it cold, we want it pretty firm. Our dough is probably going to be bulk fermenting for 4 to 6 hours until it doubles in volume. It'll go like looking from this in the container to looking more like this. And then we're going to roll out our dough. So if our butter is an 8 by 8 inch square, we're going to turn our dough into a 8 inch wide by 16 inch long rectangle. And we're going to roll it out. Flour is your friend. We're using all-purpose flour to flour everything. You don't want to go too crazy with the flour, just enough to keep it from sticking. I'm just going right here on the granite countertop, which helps to keep my dough cool. Although during filming this, it is summertime and it just happens to be 95 degrees outside, which is making my kitchen a bit warm. So the granite countertops are helping me out a lot. So we're going to roll out the dough. So it is about 1/4 of an inch thick, 3/8, somewhere in that neighborhood, probably closer to 3/8 inch. And we want to have a pretty good rectangle, like true to form. And then we're going to take our ice cold butter and we're going to put it in the middle of our dough that's rolled out, and then we're going to fold it. And we're going to bring the 12 o'clock side to the middle. We're going to bring the 6 o'clock side to the middle to create a seam. And then from here, we're going to fold, and you can kind of pinch it up and get all the dough to seal. Make sure you don't use too much flour because we want the dough to stick to itself at this point. So for this first fold, we've got our butter inside the dough here. I like to roll this out. I know it's common for some people to just get the butter block in there, get the seams together, and just fold it in half right in the middle from the seam, and that is the book fold. I choose to actually roll it out right now. And the coldness of the butter and the coldness of my countertop makes it so that this is possible without the dough being too warm, because the countertop cools the dough, the butter cools the dough warms the butter a little bit. There's just kind of this balance that happens, temperature balance. So I'll lightly flour it, and then I'm going to roll it out, and I'm just going to create just a little bit more size. This is going to help me have an easier time rolling it out the next time after we're done with what we're doing here, because there's going to be a few of these. This is going to be a process that you see a couple times. So I'm going to roll it out. I'm going to try and create a decent size rectangle that's going to be easier to fold. And if you want to think dimensions, I'm probably getting out there in the neighborhood of 10 by 18, trying to get out to like a full size rectangle here. And then I'm going to fold it in half. And here's my book fold. So I'm folding it in half where that seam was. Everything's just flattened out and it's much bigger. And you can see, as I was doing this, that there are definitely an end on each side where there is probably no or limited butter inside of the dough. And it's all going to shake out eventually in the end. I could trim this off. I just choose not to. I'd rather not waste it. I know that eventually it's going to get layered in there eventually. Book fold, parchment paper, sheet tray. I put a lid on it and it goes in the fridge. We're going to go refrigerated for 60 minutes just to get everything cold. We're going to take it out and we're going to roll it out again. We're going for this nice big rectangular shape that is about 1/4 of an inch thick, maybe 3/8. I like 1/4. And as far as size goes, so I'll talk thickness, right? So I want it to be 1/4 inch thick neighborhood, right? And when it's done being rolled out. And with this 400 gram batch, that's going to be somewhere in the neighborhood of like 10 inches wide and like 18 inches long, something like that. If you're using more dough, a bigger batch or a smaller batch, of course it's going to be different if you're shooting for that same thickness. But thickness is a little bit more important than the size, but we do want the size of it to be pretty symmetrical. So here it is, it's rolled out to the dimensions that I'm looking for. And we're going to letter fold it, letter fold being thirds. So, just like you'd fold a letter to put in an envelope. So here is our first letter fold. And now it goes back in the fridge for another 60 to 75 minutes. We want to get it cold again so that, here it comes, we take it out. This is our second rolling. Second rolling? Roll the book, folded a letter. Roll the letter, and then we're gonna fold another letter. Okay, so we're rolling this out, same thing. We're going out into that like 10-inch by 18-inch size rectangle. We're trying to keep it real uniform and real square. So move your dough around. And you can see how I'm rolling towards me, away from me, along the long side, along the short side, flip it over. Be patient with your dough. You want the dough and the butter to feel like they're moving together. And when you first bring it out of the fridge, it's gonna feel too cold. So, use some gentle rolling. The granite countertops are cold, but they are warmer than the fridge, so they are gonna temper your dough as you're working. And flipping it over kind of helps to, distribute some of the heat from the granite and the cold from the dough, and, help the dough to start to relax and warm up so you can move it. You should see the thin layer of butter under the dough, and you should see it move with the dough. You don't want to feel like you're fighting it, but at the same time, you don't want to take so long and be so patient that it gets warm and you're squishing the butter into the dough, and then we no longer have layers. This is one of those things that takes practice and some feel. So we're going to roll this guy back out to this 10-inch by 18-inch shape. We'll fold it into another letter fold, and now parchment paper, sheet tray lid, and it goes in the fridge. So I like going overnight. It's just the way my timeline works out. So if I've done this last letter fold at like 5 p.m., there's just not enough time in the day to finish this project. It would be too forced. I'd be up too late. No thanks. Okay, so next day I'm rolling this out. I'm doing this like kind of first thing in the morning, kind of 7 a.m.-ish. And we're gonna roll it out into, now it depends on what shape you wanna make. If you wanna do crescent shape, we're gonna go for more of a 3/8 inch, 1/4 inch thick rectangle. And you can decide how big you wanna make the crescents. And you just kind of have to do the math on this, whatever your preference is. I'm going for kind of bigger, medium-ish size, big size crescent. So we're going into like a 16 by 18 inch rectangle. And if you look at I'm trimming off the sides, real important to trim off the sides, no matter what shape you're making, because we want to reveal those layers of butter dough, butter dough, butter dough, butter dough. If you don't trim off the sides, they're going to be sealed, and you're not going to get that same expansion and that same kind of reveal of all the layers once it's baked. So it's kind of an important step. You don't need to take off a lot, just enough to reveal the layers. And then we're sectioning it off into rectangles that we then cut into triangles. And then we're going to take a triangle, we're going to notch it, just cut a little 1.5 to 2 inch notch so we can roll it, and it's going to want to be crescent shaped. You can sit it right on the point so that stays closed. And here we go, we have a crescent, a croissant. From here, they go on a sheet tray with parchment paper to go through their final proofing. If you want to do the barrels, the spirals that I like, you're gonna roll it out a little thinner. You're gonna go for 1/8 of an inch, and the dimensions on that, for the 400 gram batch, it's more like a 18 by 20-ish size rectangle, maybe 22 inch. And we're going thinner, so it's bigger. And we're gonna take long strips along the long side, and then we're gonna roll them up. And we don't wanna have so much flour on here that we've got tons of flour in between the layers. And then as I roll these up, I try and have like just a little bit of a wing sticking out on one side or both sides. And just roll them up pretty, you don't need to press them, but you want it to be like a snug roll. You don't want it to be loose and sloppy. These guys will have like kind of that wide seam at the end. We want to sit them down on that seam so they hold it shut. And they're going to go on sheet tray with parchment paper to do their final proofing. Now, whichever shape you go, I have a double oven. I put them in the double oven with the oven off, piece of tape on it that says, "Do not use the oven." And I will put another half sheet tray in there with like maybe a cup and a half of hot water out of the tap, purely to create a humid environment. I know there are some bakers that say to take like a saute pan, heat up a half cup of water, and then put that in the bottom of your oven. I've found that to create way too much heat in my oven, and for it to actually get the butter weeping out of my croissants and kind of ruin my end product. So I haven't had success with that. You can experiment with it. I'm just looking to have some humidity in there, so as they're going through this final proofing, this final expansion, that they're not drying out. So that's all I need, is a half sheet tray with like a cup and a half of hot water out of the tap. And I say hot water out of the tap, by the time you put it on the sheet tray and it spreads out, it's really just warm. So you're not adding heat into the cold oven. And how long do they take for this final proofing? The final proofing is really just a doubling in size, and you can see here what they look like before and what they look like after, like when they're done. They're gonna, they get kind of puffy. They'll kind of jiggle if you were to shake the tray, like if you were to bump the tray, they'll kind of jiggle a little bit. The crescents, they're smaller. There's more exposure to temperature, so they go a little faster. I think they took about 2 hours, and then the spirals they're kind of fat boys, and they took like 3.5 hours to get to the size that you see here. 425 oven, it's preheated. We got to egg wash these. I go straight egg. There's no water in it. There's no milk. It's just an egg beaten up, and then pastry brush and paint these pastries up with a nice solid coat of egg. We don't want a ton of it dripping on the bottom and pooling, because we don't want scrambled eggs connected to the bottom of our beautiful little pastries. But be real generous. Make sure you get all those edges to really get them to shine up and look really pretty when they're done baking. Okay, they're all egg washed. They go in the oven, center rack, 425 for 15 minutes. After the timer goes off, you're gonna turn them 180 degrees. You're gonna drop your oven temperature to 375. And then from here, I go a total of 15 more minutes, but I'm gonna turn them again after 10. And just to kind of get even color. After they've been in for that second 15-minute period, total of 30 minutes of baking time, they come out, they look beautiful. It's time for them to cool. I like to cool them on a wire rack. So I'll transfer them onto a little wire rack just so they don't steam out on the bottom. I want them to have good airflow. Now, don't eat these yet. You won't enjoy them. You got to let them cool for an hour. In an hour, they're still going to be a little bit warm. They're going to be moist and chewy on the inside and flaky. They'll be a mess to eat. You're going to have to go eat them outside, or definitely over a plate. They're real crusty. They're super buttery. These are amazing croissants. Super special. Now, you cut one open and you can see what our butter has done. It has served the purpose of just creating this wonderful spider webby spiral inside. Nice open crumb. Beautiful flaky crust, nice shiny color from our egg wash. These things are awesome. The whole process. This is why it costs $10 at a nice pastry shop to get a single croissant, because they're a lot of work. It's a multi-step project. It's not difficult though. And being that it is kind of a multi-step project, and there is a lot of feel, and your environment plays a huge role in how things play out, this is a skill to be developed. If you can knock these out and nail them like this first time out, power to you, good job. But I would expect to have the first time you do it being a learning experience, and then the second time you learn something else, and then maybe the third time you're kind of more on track. Really managing the rolling, and where people go wrong is really kind of in the rolling. Either they're too aggressive, and they're moving the dough beyond where the butter can go, or they're going too slow in the rolling, trying to be too gentle, and everything just gets warm and there is no more layering of butter. You just have dough. So, have the right expectations. This is an advanced project and it should take some practice. But once you get good at this, you will blow people's minds. They will not believe that these came out of your kitchen. They will think that you bought them at some fancy French pastry shop. So there you go. That's a sourdough croissant. You're using your sourdough to make an awesome laminated French pastry. Croissant.